in terms of starting a research field, this is what we've been talking a bit about in the Master of Research that you guys have been involved with is like one of the key things if you're going to start a new research field, especially a new journal, is it needs to have credibility. And if you, the way to get credibility normally, if you're say Elsevier or someone else with huge amounts of money, is you basically entice leading people to publish in that journal, and then you also treat them like kings. This is what Robert Maxwell did, the guy who set up the kind of Elsevier empire, or what is now the Elsevier empire, Pergamon Books, I think it was, or Pergamon Publishing. But he would just throw huge amounts of money at these guys to make them feel like kings and get their support. You host conferences. If you can, you fly people over. At the very least, you feed them well the whole time. And then good people publish their research with you. And that's how journals like Cell and Nature and those kind of things evolve. And then once they have that credibility, that symbolic recognition, that symbolic capital, then they are sort of forces in their own right. They've achieved that sort of credibility. So the International Journal of Sauna Studies is definitely not going to be owned by Elsevier or any of those other morally corrupt academic publishing companies who publish, so we're told, with a greater profit margin than places like Apple and Google, and are very clearly in it for the money.
Really?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. There's a few articles that suggest something like 35% sort of profit margins. It's because they don't. Their product is given to them for free by the academics who sign away their copyright. They have a tiny amount of overheads in terms of processing and whatever. Right. And then they have this huge market of researchers and libraries and institutions who want to pay for the research. They have confidentiality clauses with all of them, so you never know how much anyone's paying. So you charge the absolute maximum that the market can bear. It's horrific. There was a great article in The Guardian recently on Robert Maxwell and the sort of origins of the modern scientific publishing enterprise. So knowing all of this, as I did when I was setting up ASBA, I thought the International Journal of Sauna Studies needs to be open access, and it needs to be explicitly and proudly open access in protest against all of those for-profit publishers. And, because some of the for-profit guys, if you want to make your paper open access, it will cost you $3,000 because they know that in your funding, the requirements are to make it open access. So the analogy I use is that when a mechanic knows that your car is getting covered by insurance, they will charge you more because they know that the insurance company will pay more than you'll shop around for whoever will give you $200 off, like if it's your money. But so the academic publishing companies are like that. They know that the unis are, you can build $3,000 into your funding application, which is fine at one level if you're earning doing a big $1,000 grant. But when you're just like a person who's published their first article, because this happens not just in the scientific journals, it's in the history and cultural ones, like the ones I was publishing in, and you're like $3,000? What? No, I'm not. I'm not paying that. Like, are you kidding?
It's ridiculous as well because a lot of the time
we don't see Alex.
Yeah, just as well, I guess. No, a lot of the time the public's paying for the research, and then the researcher's given almost, or a lot of times paid to put in a journal, who then charges the public again to look at the research that they paid for.
Yep.
It's a scam like 3 times over.
It is. And the problem, like the only way that would stop is if you had coalitions of like real solidarity amongst the world's researchers to say like moratorium on sending our research to any journal run by Elsevier or Taylor Francis or Springer or whatever. The problem is that, like with most ethical choices, enough people don't care that then those are the things in place with the credibility. And you are increasingly seeing more open access journals like start. The Directory of Open Access Journals, the DOAJ, they list over 10,000 journals on their database now. And to get listed on there, you need to have run, I think, at least 2 volumes. And so like there's a lot of stuff out there. I just think, though, that there's when we talk about this in class, there's so much emphasis in our society generally on product over process, right? So we only look at the glitzy final product, whether that's the cheap clothing in the department store that was made by people in East Asian countries or subcontinental countries under shocking conditions for hardly any money, or whether it's food, like most of us don't endorse mindless, senseless, systematic cruelty and violence that's unnecessary, but we do that every day with the food that we eat. Petrol and those kind of things, all the conflict minerals in our phones, and like we're just not as a society conditioned to interrogate like the process, and if there's an ethical problem to stand up collectively. Like there are small pockets where that happens, or if like when it's something like Japanese whaling that everyone gets really angry about, then people get angry because they don't have to change anything about themselves. They just want those people to change. But when it's something that we have to change, people are far less
Angry.
there might be anger, but it's something like I would call cognitive gag reflex. Is in like when you gag, your body says spit it out before you've really thought about it. Cognitive gag reflex is like when ideas come in and it's like, no, that's going to be way too hard. You're just going to have to you're going to have to change so many things about your life if you actually care about that principle. Like, let's just not think about it seriously. So I think that happens on a mass kind of level. And it's really disappointing though that in academia that still happens. Like the one place where you might expect a bit of resistance, no, academia is the exact same percentage of kind of heroes and villains as the rest of society, and I would say that's a pretty low percentage of heroes and a pretty high percentage of villains, especially in the Hannah Arendt sense. I don't know if you guys know Hannah Arendt, the German Jewish philosopher. She wrote a lot of stuff in the mid-20th century, kind of political theory stuff and reflections. She wrote a book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, which is about the only the only death penalty that Israel has ever formally carried out, I believe, where they captured one of the kind of Nazi agents and put him to death in, I think it was 1963 or something. Anyway, so she did a lot of analysis on the Holocaust. She had to flee Germany in 1933. She was actually the doctoral student of the guy that I did my PhD on, Karl Jaspers. But she came up with this concept, like basically the question of why society fell into such, terrible. Why the German people allowed this to happen, basically, and her answer was something about the banality of evil. So when something's banal, it's so like just boring as to be not even sort of worth mentioning or thinking about, but the banality of evil. So her point was that evil, it's that whole thing that evil flourishes when good people do nothing. That evil isn't like sinister, malevolent people running around everywhere screaming for blood. It's loads of people who in other circumstances might exercise more moral agency, but just basically fall in line. And it's the banality of like how mundane and everyday this system of domination kind of, how mundane and everyday all of the things are that make this system work. Other people have made similar observations. There's an amazing book about like who were the Nazis by a guy, I can't remember his name exactly, but the book is called Ordinary Men, as in like who did this? Ordinary men.
Yeah, because it would have taken so many people that, they're not all Adolf Hitler. These have to be ordinary people living ordinary lives that by themselves you would expect would be quite horrific.
Would have a little bit more, would disagree in many ways with what's happening and what was being done in their name. So, but bringing this back to Elsevier and those kind of and the academic publishing industry, I think that is a really major problem where we collectively, as the academic kind of world, have said, "Yep, yeah, okay, yeah, we'll sign that. If that's what we need to do." When you could have the leaders of like the major, the top 100 universities in those rankings. I hate the rankings, by the way, as well. They're a steaming pile of crap. But that's another problem. Yeah, because they don't have anything to do with quality teaching. They incentivize pumping out research and getting patents and things. But anyway, they're the ones at the big symbolic capital. If they all said, no, as of now, we are just putting an absolute moratorium because you can publish open access, or like we will accept minor fees that are like processing fees for staff to actually be there to do this stuff and for the hosting of databases and stuff, but like the astronomical fees that you guys charge, like, no, sorry, we are not any longer participating in that. Like that could happen. That's way more foreseeable than humanity kind of suddenly, stopping eating meat or stopping, using forced labor or other things like that. I think it's still totally unrealistic, but it's way more doable. So all of this is to say that the International Journal of Sauna Studies will be fully open access in perpetuity, and it is owned by ASBA. It is not owned by a university or any other institution, because that means that's the only way we can ensure that situation remains.
That's actually really cool.